Okay, fantastic, guys. Looks like most of us have got the technical issues sorted, so we're going to kick off today. And there'll also be video of this webinar as well, so we can always come back and watch it at a future date. So really fantastic. We've had a really good response to this topic in our series of 10 webinars that we're doing. And this one is very close to home for a lot of people out there because it's really flavour of the month at the moment, and that is setting up an online business or setting up an online store. And with setting up an online store, there are quite a few legal things that you need to be across. And so today we're going to run through the top 5 or 6 real legal considerations that you need to be across when you're operating online. Operating online and selling things online is a fantastic way to start a business because you automatically have the scale and the reach of thousands of customers. But with that reach and with that scale comes a few legal problems, you could call them. And so today I want to run through those. So before we get started, I know a lot of you are very familiar with LawPath, but for the people that are just joining us that are new, give you a very quick overview of what LawPath does and how we help new businesses and small to medium businesses sort out all of their legal issues. So my name is Dominic Woolridge. I'm head of legal here at LawPath, and for the last 3 years, I've dealt with hundreds of new businesses day in, day out, helping them start startups, start bricks and mortar businesses, but the majority of those have been online businesses and particularly e-commerce stores. So after speaking to thousands of businesses, I've really been able to pull out the main issues that they have when they first start. And today's webinar is going to go through those and really help you get ahead of the game in terms of the legal things you need to be across. So LawPath, we have roughly about 23,000 customers now across Australia. We do have some international clients as well, but the majority of our clients are based onshore. And we also have roughly 700 lawyers servicing those clients. So at a very high level, LawPath is a platform that small to medium businesses can log on to and sort out all of their legal needs. That could be as simple as completing a legal document that you need. It could be accessing our legal marketplace. The marketplace is a fantastic offering where you can request 3 fixed price quotes within 4 hours from our 700 lawyers. So if you are you have a legal issue or a legal dispute and you want to find a lawyer, the old traditional way would be to ask a friend or walk up to your local high street and look for the sign that says lawyer. Now it's far more transparent, it's far more easier to compare lawyers. You can jump on the LawPath marketplace and you can receive fixed price quotes from lawyers where you can compare them, you can see their reviews, you can see their ratings. So it's a new way of finding lawyers and it's far better than the old way. Another service that we provide, which is fantastic for new businesses, is registering a company. So if you listen to our last webinar, we talked about the benefits of incorporating a company, which there are many, and we provide that service. We have what we call a direct API with ASIC, which is the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, and that means we can register a company in a couple of minutes and get that out of the way for you. It's very simple and far better than the old traditional way. So today, as I said, there are kind of 6 components to this webinar. Each will take roughly 5 to 6 minutes to explain, and that should leave us with a good amount of time for questions. Obviously, we'll be answering questions. My colleague Tom will be answering questions as we go. And then at the end, if there's any more complex questions, I am happy to answer those as well. And additionally to that, if you're uncomfortable with asking questions on the feed, or you're uncomfortable asking questions in front of other people, we are always very happy to have a confidential phone call with you or liaise via email. I know sometimes legal issues can be complex and can be quite personal, and so always happy to have a one-on-one conversation as well. So the agenda today, we're going to start off with the essential legal documents that you need for your website. There's 3 of them. I want to walk you through which ones they are and what they do, and most importantly, why you need them. Specifically, a few of them you're required to have them under law. The second area I'd like to touch on is intellectual property. Now, you might be thinking, I don't need to worry about intellectual property, I'm just starting an online store. But trust me, this is one of the legal issues you need to start thinking about very early on, because it can come back down the track and bite you. So we'll set you up and give you all the information you need to get all your intellectual property sorted from day one. Number 3, which is a really, really important one when you're selling goods and services online, is your obligations when marketing and advertising. Obviously, to sell your goods, you're going to need to market and advertise, and therefore we need to be across how you can do that and stay legally compliant. Number 4, need to touch on it. It's a little bit dry, but that's around your PCI compliance. So payment cards, if you're taking any kind of payment online, there are a lot of laws and rules around that. And I'm going to touch on that briefly, just so you make sure that you're on top of things. Lastly is the Australian consumer law. There's a few things that we can't do when we're selling goods and services, and I'm going to touch on those to make sure, again, you always stay on the right side of the law. So let's get right into it. The documents you need when you're setting up a website, and in particular, when you're setting up an e-commerce store or selling goods and services online. So these are the 3 documents: the privacy policy, the terms and conditions, and the terms of use. So privacy policy, what is it? A privacy policy is a document that you see on most Australian websites, and it states what you are doing with confidential information. Now, when I talk about confidential information, I talk about things like first name, last name, mobile numbers, email addresses, credit card information, any information that is unique and confidential to one person. You need to tell people what you're doing with that information. Now, you're obviously, if you're selling goods and services online, you're collecting credit card information. But if you've got a newsletter capture, you're collecting email addresses, that's also confidential information. So you need to be across what your customers want to be across, what you're doing with that information, where you're storing it, and most importantly, probably, who you're sharing it with. So first question, do I need a privacy policy? So under Australian law, any company with a revenue under $3 million is not required under law to have a privacy policy. But that by no means means that you should not have one. It's a really, really good idea to let people know what you're doing with their confidential information. Now, I'm going to safely assume that most of your revenues are under $3 million at this stage. But as I said, it's a really, really good idea to have a privacy policy in place. And a privacy policy is a relatively simple document. It's usually only 2 to 3 pages long, and it covers, as I said before, how you're collecting that information, how you're storing that information, who you're sharing that information with, and potentially what you're going to do with that information in the future. So in 2014, there were some new rules came out around privacy policies. And so I want you to be across those, because if you had a privacy policy on your online store before 2014, you will need to update it. So the changes to the rules are called the APPs, and there's 10 main areas. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all 10 of those areas, but I do want to point out a couple of very crucial ones. So obviously you need to be identifying what types of personal information you're collecting. And as I mentioned before, this could be a list such as names, email addresses, phone numbers. Obviously, how you're collecting it is very important, and where you're storing it. Now, one thing that is usually a trap for young players is that in the current rules stipulate that you must say where that information is being stored. Now, you might be thinking, look, I'm just a small online business. My website's in Australia. I'm selling to Australian customers. The information is being stored in Australia. But you really need to think about the hosting service you're using and where the information and where the servers are kept. Because you might be using a Shopify or a basic WordPress website here in Australia, but the information might be being sent off and stored offshore. And you need to tell clients that or customers that in your privacy policies. So you'll see that usually towards the end of a privacy policy, there is a section that says the information might be stored in Australia, America, Japan, just to give you a few examples. So it's very, very important that you put that in there. And the last point on privacy policies is you must tell the client or the customer who you might be sharing that information with. More likely than not, the customer needs to opt in if you are sharing that information. So if you've collected a great email list and then you suddenly go and give that email list to another company and allow that company to email your clients must have consented to that when they first gave you the information. Now, I know I've given you a lot of information there. You might be thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to write a privacy policy? Fantastic thing is that LawPath has a really, really good privacy policy on its website. You can log on to lawpath.com.au and you can complete your privacy policy in under 5 minutes. And again, your first document is always free on LawPath. So this would be a great free document to introduce you to the LawPath system. What will happen is you'll be asked a number of questions about your business and you'll enter it in a very natural language form. And then our software will generate the privacy policy for you with all the legally binding clauses in it. And you can very quickly download that and upload it to your website. So the next document that's very important is the terms and conditions or the terms of use. And I want to go through in a little bit more detail about what these documents are and which ones you would require. So firstly, terms and conditions. Terms and conditions are legally required if you are selling goods and services online in Australia. So if you're taking payments and you're selling any type of goods and service, you need terms and conditions on your website. This is a document that includes things such as a refund policy and a replacement policy. Under the law, these are you're required to have these type of policies in place, and they're usually and mostly always contained in the terms and conditions. The next document is a terms of use. The terms of use is usually used on an information site or a blog. So the alternative there is if you're not selling goods and services, you can use a terms of use. And a terms of use will include clauses and aspects around what people can and cannot do on your website, but also the information on your website. Can they take the information and use it in other places? Can they take pictures from your website and use it in other places? So look, to summarize which ones you need, if you are selling goods and services online, you are required to have a terms and conditions. If you are running an information or a blog website, you should have a terms of use. Again, very easy to get these documents completed. You can go to the LawPath website and fill out one of our natural language forms, and our software will generate the document for you. Now, one thing to note around terms and conditions is that an e-commerce site, the terms and conditions are usually relatively straightforward. But what has become very, very popular in the last few years is marketplace websites. So a marketplace website, I suppose the best example is eBay, where there are buyers and sellers. People can upload goods onto the website and people can buy goods from the website. And in this case, you would require almost 2 sets of terms and conditions, one for the supply side and one for the demand side. So if you are out there and you are running a marketplace, just note that if a standard or simple terms and conditions will not be of use to you, you will be required to have terms for both sides. And I suppose this leads on very nicely to this idea that I was talking about at the beginning, which is our marketplace. So if you have a company or a business that has a unique idea, chances are you're going to need a unique set of terms and conditions as well. And so you'll most likely want a lawyer to help you with those. So if you are looking to have terms and conditions created, and you don't think the standard template will be sufficient, you can always jump on the LawPath marketplace and you can request 3 fixed price quotes within 4 hours to have your terms and conditions customized for your unique business idea. So I suppose I've touched on it just there. Do I need a lawyer? I think for simple DIY solutions, you do not need a lawyer. When you're starting out and you're bootstrapping, last thing you want to do is spend thousands and thousands of dollars on legal documents. We all know that they're boring. It would be much more exciting spending that money on marketing or advertising and getting people to buy your product. So there's 2 offerings. The first is the DIY documents. They are sufficient, they'll get you going, but in the long term, it's always a good idea to have them checked by a lawyer. Maybe once you're starting to generate some revenue and there's some risk actually coming into the business, that's when it's time to reach out to a lawyer on the LawPath marketplace and get them to customize the documents for you. Now, you might be wondering why I've got a picture of a robot on the screen at the moment. And that's because LawPath recently undertook a bit of a project to build a legal bot. And a legal bot is a piece of software that you can have a conversation with, and it will talk to you about your legal requirements. So the first bot that we built was a privacy bot. And so our bot is called Lexi, the LawPath legal bot. And you can find Lexi by Googling LawPath Lexi or LawPath legal bot. And you can have a conversation with Lexi straight from your computer. And Lexi will talk to you about your business and ask you questions about your business and tell you about your privacy obligations. Lexi actually looks at the privacy legislation, compares it against your business, and tells you whether you need it or not. Then Lexi can go a step further and actually draft your privacy policy for you on the information that you've given her. So it's a fantastic way to get your privacy policy up and running, and more importantly, it's completely free. Lexi's in beta at the moment and we're testing her, so you can go to the LawPath Lexi page, you can have a conversation with Lexi and generate your privacy policy for absolutely no cost. So I'd highly recommend you do that. Even if you already have a privacy policy, fantastic to go back and have a chat to Lexi to see if any of your obligations have changed. Right, so on to topic number 2, which is intellectual property. And I really wanted to touch on this because it is so important for businesses, but in particular, online businesses and online stores. So intellectual property can be summarized as the assets of your business that are intangible. So the assets of your business that you can't see or can't touch. When you first start a business or a company, usually your idea is all you have. You don't have a big warehouse, you don't have a fleet of cars, you don't have a bricks and mortar office. So your idea and your process is the all-important value in your business. And it is really, really important that you protect that idea. So let me run you through a couple of examples on when intellectual property would come up and how to protect it. And the first one we see all the time here at LawPath is around the website. As you know, if you want to sell goods and services online, you're obviously going to need a website. And unless you're a designer or a developer, you're most likely going to have to outsource that build. When you outsource a build and you get someone else to build the website for you, they are building intellectual property in your business. And it is really, really important that that intellectual property is assigned over to your business. Now, one thing to note is that intellectual property is only assigned by written agreement. So how do you make sure that that designer or that developer that you engaged on Upwork or on Freelancer, who's based in India, is assigning your IP? And that's by having a written agreement in place. So the best way to do it is if you're looking to engage someone to create your website, you need to have an agreement in place that has an IP clause and a confidentiality clause. So the document would very simply state, I'd like you to build my website. Here's the scope of what you're building. Here's how much I'm going to pay you. You need to keep it confidential. And any of the IP, the code, the design, the process that you create is automatically assigned over to me. So that's the simple way about going. And you can very simply do that by using a contractor agreement or a web development services agreement, both which are available on the LawPath website. Interestingly enough as well, under some of the terms and conditions on these freelancer and Upwork websites, there are IP clauses already written into the terms and conditions. So if you are using one of those online marketplaces, have a quick look to make sure that the IP is being assigned. Now, the reason I like to talk about this is that over the last few years, we've seen a lot of horror stories here at LawPath with people that had fantastic ideas for websites and they got them built overseas or online. And for the first 6 months, everything was going great. And then suddenly someone sends them a link of a website based out of America or based out of China that is exactly the same as their website and doing exactly the same as what they wanted to do. And what had happened is the developers that were creating their website had reused their code or reused their idea with somebody else. And that's the last thing you want when you spent the 6 months trying to get your business idea off the ground. So IP is really, really important, and you need to make sure that it's always being assigned to you. Now, I know there's probably some people out there saying, oh no, I got a developer to do some work for me, and I didn't have any written agreement in place. Well, not to worry, there is a solution. And that solution is called an assignment of IP deed. And what an assignment of IP deed can do is that any existing IP that's been created, you can assign that over to you or your business by completing this deed. Now, you will need to go back to the designer or the developer, and you will need to ask them to sign the document, but it's a very simple document. It's usually only 1 or 2 pages, and that will make sure that retrospectively you are collecting all that IP. What I'm going to do now is jump to point number 4 on the slide, because I think it really ties in around with creating your website. Now, often if you're starting an online store, maybe you're starting it up as a lifestyle idea, but a lot of you out there are starting up these stores on the hope that one day you might be able to sell it, or even better, bring in some investors and increase the value of your business. One of the first questions an investor is always going to ask you is who owns the IP. When an investor first comes knocking on your door, if you're that lucky, they will go through what's called a due diligence process. And this is a process of checking all the documents of your business to make sure that everything's in order. Last thing they want to do is invest $500,000 or $1 million into your business and then find out that there was an issue or there was a lawsuit or there was the wrong insurance or there was the wrong owners. But more importantly, they want to make sure that all the assets in the business are owned by you. And so they will ask for all the evidence to show that you own the IP. And we've seen a number of companies come unstuck when they thought they'd found an investor and they thought they were about to get millions of dollars into their business, and suddenly the investor pulls out because they didn't have their IP in order. So really, really important from day one that you have all your contracts in writing, and anyone that's creating your website, your designs, your logo, there's always a document in place that shows the IP has been assigned. And that brings me to point number 2, which is design and content. Now, as we know, often it's hard to build a business as just a solo operator or by yourself. And so you'll obviously need people to help you. These days, bringing on contractors is a fantastic way to get your logo, your designs, your copy of your website, your content up and running. Again, make sure that you have written agreements in place with all of these people. Even if it's your uncle who is doing you a favor and helping you write your website for you, it's really, really important that you have a document in place that says what he did for you is being assigned over to you. And we've already touched on the assigning of the IP. Obviously, if the IP hasn't been created yet, make sure that there are documents in place. Actually, if all of you go and have a look at your employment contracts after the webinar and you look through the clauses, you'll see that there's an IP clause in that agreement. And what that says is that anything that you do whilst on your company's property, for example, using their computer or on their phone or during business hours, is automatically assigned over to them. So you need to make sure for your business you're doing the same thing. And that brings me to a very, very quick side note around if you are starting up an online store, but you have an existing job. It's very important that any of the work you're doing for your new website or your new company is done on your own time for exactly the reason that I just mentioned. Your full-time or your part-time employment agreement will most likely have an IP clause in it, saying that any work you do goes to your employer and not you. And so if you are starting a business on the side, which is very, very popular these days, you need to make sure that you're doing it after business hours on your own computer, on your own phone, and not using any of your existing employees' resources. That's very, very important. I call it the moonlighting problem, and we see it all the time here at LawPath. And often there's some very ugly litigation matters that come out of these issues. The next issue I'll just very quickly touch on around assigning IP is what I like to call the Zuckerberg problem. We all know the Facebook movie. We all know Facebook, and we all know the story, which said that allegedly the Winklevoss twins came up with the idea, and that Mark Zuckerberg stole that idea when he was working on building the website. And that doesn't just happen in the movies. It doesn't just happen on Facebook. It happens every day when people are using developers and contractors. It's not to say that the developer or the contractor that you're going out to is going to steal your idea. That's not their business. Their business is building websites. However, you do need to be really, really careful. And so obviously having a contract in place is very important. But the other ways to protect yourself are more practical. For example, Upwork is a fantastic website that you can use to find people to build your website. What you do on Upwork is you put up a brief, and then people will come back to you with quotes on how much they think it will cost to build that website. One of the very, very easy ways to protect your idea is when you put up your brief, only use minimal information. Don't put up the full scope, all the information, all the secret sauce where everybody can see it. Because chances are there might be someone on there that can take the idea. Put up a simple brief and narrow your designers or your developers down to maybe the top 2 or 3, and then share the full project scope with them. It's a really practical way of trying to protect your idea. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is around marketing and marketing online. And from a legal perspective, what is known as the Spam Act. So when you are selling businesses online, chances are you're going to need to be doing some marketing. And that marketing might be through online advertising, particularly through Google AdWords, or really, really popular and a very, very effective way of marketing is through email. But if you are sending any kind of communications to your customers, you need to be compliant with the Spam Act. And the Spam Act controls all electronic messages out to potential clients, and it involves any kind of offer to supply goods and services, or any kind of offer to advertise goods and services. And so there are a couple of things that I want you to be aware of, and 3 main requirements. And the first one is that any kind of commercial electronic message must be sent with consent. So you need to have consent to contact that customer. So for example, when you sign up to a newsletter on a website, by signing up to that newsletter in the terms and conditions, you'll be saying there is an implied consent that they can contact you and give you newsletters and most likely advertise products to you. Now, a lot of the time the consent is included in the terms and conditions. And as you would all know, when you purchase something, usually you tick that box just before you push pay that says, I agree to the terms and conditions. And buried in those terms and conditions will be consent for them to contact you. And that's why every week you get emails from businesses you've bought products for, because you've consented to receiving emails. The next compliance issue under the Spam Act is information to identify the sender. So what I mean by that is if you would send a text message or an email, in that email or that text message, the recipient must be able to identify who sent that email. So down the bottom of the email, you usually see the sender's name, the sender's ABN or ACN, and the sender's address. So it's very, very important. You can't just send blank emails or messages out. You need to identify who's being sent it. And the last compliance issue is that every email must have an unsubscribe link. And so what that means is they must be able to opt out of being sent these messages. So again, if you scroll to the very bottom of these emails that you're being sent, you'll see that there's an unsubscribe button. You can click on that button and it allows you to be removed from the list. Very, very important. They have been coming down very, very harshly on people that don't comply with these three issues. Now, very, very quickly, there are a number of exclusions to these rules, and this covers government bodies, political parties, charities, and religious organisations. So if you are one of those four, you don't need to comply with these issues. However, there will be other requirements, compliance requirements that you do need to be across. All right, so that's touching on the Spam Act, and chances are you will be sending communications to potential customers, and so you do need to be across that. There's some fantastic resources on the LawPath website in our blogs and legal guides section if you want to know some more information about that. All right, I'm going to touch on PCI compliance very quickly, but there's a really, really good shortcut to this that I want to explain. So PCI compliance stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, and it deals with any time that you might be taking credit card payments through your website. Now, there are a lot of rules around this, and everyone must comply. If you are collecting payments online, you need to comply with this. And often it's a very complex procedure to become compliant. However, there's definitely a shortcut, and that is by using payment gateways. So when you next purchase online, you'll most likely come to the payment page and you'll see that at the bottom it usually says something like powered by Stripe or powered by PayPal or powered by Braintree. And all of these are payment gateways, and they deal with all the PCI compliance standards for you. So actually, when you use one of these gateways, what it means is that you actually never take the credit card information. Although the credit card is being entered on your website, the information is stored with one of the payment gateways and is never actually shared with you. So it allows you to step around all of these compliance issues. So as a shortcut, I would definitely recommend using a payment gateway. They have some fantastic services out there where they can set you up very, very quickly, and you literally put a line of code onto your website and you have a payment set up straight away. A really fantastic one, if you're looking to set up a credit card payment processing service very, very quickly just to test out an idea, is a company called Gumroad. You can very, very easily take credit card payments on your website using Gumroad. So I encourage you to have a look at that. So look, I'm not going to go on any more around PCI compliance because I would definitely recommend, instead of going into too much detail, speaking to one of these payment gateways. But if you are looking for more information, you can go to www.pcisecuritystandards.org, and that is a website run by the government that has a lot of information around how credit card payments must be taken on your website. All right, now I'd like to touch very, very quickly, because I want to leave some time for questions, on the Australian consumer law. So the Australian consumer law is the piece of legislation that covers all Australians if they're selling goods and services online. Now, it particularly applies to consumer goods. Now, consumer goods are less than $40,000, personal, domestic, or household use, and goods considered to be bought by consumers. So I'm safely assuming that most of the people today are selling consumer goods. So there's three main areas that we need to be across, and I'll touch on them for 30 seconds each. The first is misleading and deceptive conduct. And these main areas, these are things you cannot do. So the first is misleading and deceptive conduct. So you cannot mislead or deceive your clients or customers. That's the lawyer coming out of me, calling them clients. So this includes lying about description of goods on your website. This includes the wrong pricing. This includes making false or inaccurate claims about what your product or service can do. And there's a very, very simple test, which is, would it likely mislead or deceive a general class of persons? So it's quite a broad test, and so you do need to be very, very careful here. But it comes down to common sense. You can't lie about selling goods and services online. What people are purchasing needs to be what is delivered. Now, one thing to note is that silence is not a rebuttal to this. So you cannot just not say something if it would have been reasonable that you did need to talk about that feature of the product. Adversely or alternatively to that, puffery, which is exaggerating claims about your product. For example, this is the best ever, or this is the best product in Australia, can sometimes be seen as fair, just depending on whether it was reasonable or not. One thing to note there is that disclaimers cannot get you out of trouble. So, for example, I couldn't say that this car will do, I'm selling a car online, if I was to sell a car online. And I can't say that this car will do 300 kilometers per hour, and then down the bottom of my page, in a disclaimer, say that any mention of speed cannot be relied upon on my website. You can't do that. So yeah, any kind of disclaimer is not allowed. Give you a very, very recent example, which everyone will know. So Telstra was recently sued because what they said in their ads, and I'm sure we've all seen them, is coverage everywhere in Australia. That was their slogan. And it was proven that actually Telstra didn't have coverage everywhere in Australia, and that was seen as to mislead and deceive. All right, the next one is false representations. So there's a list here of false representations, and all of these must be true. And this includes price, need, the standard, the quality or the value, the history, the age, or the place of origin. Very common one there is Australian made. Often products will have that badge on it. Obviously, you can't put an Australian made badge if it's not made in Australia. And more importantly, any kind of approval or affiliation with another brand. You can't suddenly say, this is approved by another company if you have no relationship with that company. And the last one there is testimonials. Peer-to-peer reviews and testimonials are very, very important online these days. Often people will not buy unless they can see reviews and testimonials. But unfortunately, well, it's quite common sense, but false testimonials are not allowed. All right, the next one there is unconscionable conduct. And when I say unconscionable conduct, you can't target anyone. Well, there's two main areas. The first is you cannot target anyone with a special disability. And that special disability might be the elderly, the financially disadvantaged, and those type of disabilities. And so to give you a very quick example there was a very famous case around the Commonwealth Bank was targeting elderly couples and trying to get them in to refinance their mortgages and trying to get them into new financial products. And they were specifically targeting elderly people, and therefore that was seen as unconscionable conduct. The next one, which is very, very recent, is around people in financial difficulties. So there are a number of companies out there that were providing education, private education, TAFE courses, and they were offering free laptop computers if you were to sign up to this education. And not stating that this education would be billed to your HEX bill and could be as high as $50,000. Some of these cases are still ongoing, but these are the type of examples of unconscionable conduct. And the last one there is unfair terms. So this very much, a great example of this is if you are selling a subscription service online, you can't be locking people into contracts. For example, you can't say that you are locked in to a 5-year contract and we can increase the price of the subscription whenever we want. That would be seen as an unfair term. Usually an unfair term is increasing the price of your goods and service without notice, unless it's written into your terms and conditions. So Look, I'll leave, those are the main 4 areas under the Australian consumer law that you need to be across. Obviously, I think a lot of it is common sense, especially around misleading and deceptive conduct. However, if you do have any questions, we're always very happy to answer them here at LawPath. And again, our blog is a fantastic place to find really good resources around Australian consumer law. So I definitely recommend that you go there and you have a read, or you give us a call on 1-800-LawPath. Now, I'm going to skip over the next few slides because it's nearly time for us to finish. But these slides will be available online. And what these next few slides are a checklist as to if you are selling goods or services, what you need to be across. And I've covered a lot of them in covering those 4 aspects of the ACL, but here it is in just a nice, concise way that we've broken it down for you. So if you are selling goods and services online, you can, once we send out this slide deck, you can have a look through there, just double check you're on the right side of the law. And finally, that gets me to our special offer today, which is a really, really good one. We do a special offer at the end of all of these webinars, and each time they seem to be getting better and better. And this one is an annual subscription, so 12 months, unlimited access to the LawPath platform for $199. So you're saving almost half, that's 40% off a normal annual subscription. And this is going to give you access to things like privacy policies, terms of use, terms and conditions, IP assignment deeds, contractor agreements, website development agreements, and many more agreements that you'll need to run your business, including once you start bringing on employees, all the employee agreements that you would need. So unlimited access for 1 whole year for $199 is a fantastic offer, and it's really going to set you up over the next year for all your legals. So I definitely recommend having a look at that offer. You can just click on the link there, try.lawpath.com.au/webinar/offer, and you'll be able to enter in your details, and you'll be able to get that annual subscription. We had a lot of these. We had this offer 2 weeks ago at another webinar, and we had a lot of clients coming through and getting this offer. So it's a really, really good value. I definitely recommend it if throughout this presentation you've thought, oh, I need a couple of these legal documents. Well, this is going to set you up. All right, well, look, it's come to the end. We've got about 5 minutes to 1 o'clock, so we're going to wrap it up there. I think we've been answering some questions as we've gone through. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email us at support@lawpath.com.au or give us a call on 1-800-LawPath, and we'd be happy to answer any questions for you. And additionally, these slides and a recording of this webinar will be emailed to you over the next couple of days. So if there's anything in here that you wanted to go back and have a listen to, you can do so. But just again, that offer just for people on the webinar today was an annual subscription for $199. That's 40% off the normal price, and that's going to give you everything you need from a legal perspective for 12 months. Thanks for joining us today, guys. We'll see you on our next edition of our LawPath webinars.